It is the video that I always look forward to every year. The video that I get the most excited to post every single year. I am talking about, of course, my March Madness bracket video. But before I get to my picks and before I start to fill out my bracket, I want to address a few things. One, I am once again hosting a tournament challenge this year. I will put the link to the tournament challenge in the description box down below. Please feel free to join. Second, if you have a tournament challenge you would like me to join, let me know and I will join your tournament challenge. And the last thing, if you have a March Madness bracket video that you want me to watch, let me know in the comment section. And I'm saying to let me know in the comment section instead of posting a link, because sometimes you try to comment a link, it won't show up in the comment section on occasion. So that way it's just easy if you let me know if you have a video, and I will watch your video and I'll give it a like and I will leave a comment. I enjoy watching bracket videos. It's my favorite thing to watch as far as things that are sports related. So with all that out of the way, let's get to what you're all waiting for, and that is my picks for the 2022 NCAA Tournament. I'm starting off in the West region, and once again, the Gonzaga Bulldogs have the #1 overall seed in the tournament, and they go up against Georgia State in the round of 64. Now, there's nothing easy guaranteed anymore in March Madness. Once UMBC upset Virginia back in 2018, nothing became guaranteed anymore. But I think that Gonzaga, I feel like it's a safe pick here to have them advance past Georgia State. Boise State and Memphis, the 8-9 matchup, and 8-9s are always tough, and this one is going to be no different. We saw the Mountain West tournament last week, and it was, at least in my opinion, the most competitive tournament out of all of them. Maybe a hot take there, but every team that won down the stretch in that tournament, they had to earn that win. They had to play every single second of that game. And if you're going to play a Mountain West team at any point in this tournament, you need to be prepared to at least have the mentality that you can play 2 games, because Mountain West teams, they will exhaust you. They will make you work for every basket. They'll make you work for every bucket, every trip to the free throw line. They'll make you work for it all. Memphis did get a lot of preseason hype before the season began. So 8-9s are always a crapshoot, but I'm going to pick Memphis here because I just feel like Memphis got some preseason hype. UConn and New Mexico State. I would not be surprised personally if New Mexico State pulled off the upset, because they are capable of doing so. The last time New Mexico State was in the tournament, I believe it was back in 2019 when they were a 12 seed, and they took 5 seed Auburn to the wire. And Auburn eventually went on to the Final Four. And you can argue that they could have been at least in the championship game. And UConn is not the best shooting team in the country by any means, but they're a pretty good rebounding team. And I do think they're going to have a bit of an advantage in the boards department in this game. So I'm going to pick UConn in this one, but I would not be surprised if Mexico State pulled off an upset. Arkansas and Vermont. Now, this game, it's a tough one to call for a 4-13. Arkansas, they have been hyped up through the last few weeks of a team that can make a deep run. In fact, in one of the practice brackets I did a few weeks ago, I had Arkansas all the way in the Final Four. And Vermont, they're coming to this tournament hot. Vermont dominated their conference tournament, dominating everybody in their path to get here. And Vermont has experience. But I am going to pick the Razorbacks in this one. But I would not be shocked at all if the Catamounts pull off the upset. But I am going to Arkansas. Alabama versus the winner of the play-in game between Rutgers and Notre Dame. I feel like, in my opinion, it does not matter who wins in the play-in game. I think either one will beat Alabama. Whether if it's Rutgers, a team that I think is on a mission after they fell just short of making the Sweet 16 just 1 year ago and allowed Houston to end that game on a tear, or Notre Dame, a team that is very disciplined, a team that doesn't foul that much. In fact, they've given up the least amount of fouls out of all the teams in the tournament this season. So I have the winner of the play-in game between Rutgers and Notre Dame beating Alabama, moving on to the round of 32. Texas Tech and Montana State, and I am going to pick the Red Raiders here. I do not think there's going to be an upset here. Texas Tech, they have shown in recent years that they have the capability of making a deep run. In fact, we've seen them make a couple deep runs in recent tournaments, and it would not surprise me if we saw that again out of the Red Raiders. Michigan State and Davidson, and I think this is going to be a great 7-10 matchup. Davidson lost a heartbreaker in their conference tournament final, while Michigan State, they are a part of that Big Ten conference that looks stacked once again this season, and they were stacked in last year's tournament, and only one of them made the Sweet 16. And it does seem unlikely that a Spartans run could take place. It could still happen, but it's unlikely. But I still think Michigan State, they get past Davidson in this one. Duke and Cal State Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton got into the tournament in a thrilling finish in their conference tournament final against Long Beach State. And now they take on a Duke team that has faced distractions all year long. In fact, they faced multiple ones. They faced distractions of Coach K his last season when it was announced. A huge distraction, knowing that it was his swan song season. His final home game, the hype and the buildup of it all week long, the atmosphere, the pregame ceremonies, distraction. Coach K's final ACC tournament. They overcame the distractions a little bit, but once they ran to Virginia Tech, who many could say and argue that they're the hottest team coming into the tournament, and Duke played one of their worst games of the year. In fact, the two games that Duke overcame a major distraction, they had their two worst performances of the season. And for a young team to face so many distractions, this is going to be another one. This is going to be the biggest distraction they faced all year long. The hype and the buildup of Coach K's last NCAA tournament. And can a young team overcome a big distraction like that? I think they will overcome it, at least for this game. I think Duke beats Cal State Fullerton. Moving on to the East region, Baylor and Norfolk State. Baylor, the defending champions, and they have been dealing with some injuries all season long. And Norfolk State is in their third NCAA tournament appearance in school history. And their previous two trips to the tournament, they've won at least a game. But I don't think they win a game here. I think Baylor wins and moves on to the round of 32. North Carolina and Marquette. Shaka Smart's first year at Marquette, and he has them as a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. However, since his Final Four run with VCU, he has tended to struggle in the early portion of March Madness, and I think the struggles continue. I think North Carolina, they are a team that I think is peaking at the right time. I think the big win against Duke on the road in Coach K's final home game, I think that provided some momentum for the Tar Heels. I'm going with North Carolina. St. Mary's and the winner of Wyoming and Indiana. And this is a huge question mark for me. I'm not sure exactly what to put on here, but if Wyoming wins and I think St. Mary's wins, But if Indiana wins, I think Indiana beats St. Mary's. So I'm not quite sure what to pick. So I'm going to put the winner of the playing game between Wyoming and Indiana because right now I'm leaning towards Indiana winning that playing game. I just feel like Indiana is the more peaked team at this point, as I feel like they're peaking at a decent time. They did what they had to do to make the tournament, and they almost made the final in the Big Ten Conference tournament, but a game-winning shot by Jordan Bohannon in the final second half. I'm going with the Hoosiers in the playing game, and I think the Hoosiers, they take down St. Mary's. But I will be honest with you, I am going to change it if Wyoming beats Indiana. I think St. Mary's Wyoming would be a very low-scoring game that I think St. Mary's would end up winning. UCLA and Akron, the 4 and 13. And I'm going to go with UCLA. We saw UCLA make the Final Four just last year as an 11 seed, and they actually came from the first four. They're the second team to do that, and the other team to do that was VCU, led by coached by Shaka Smart. And there was no expectations for UCLA last year. But now there kind of is some expectations because they've proven that they can get to the Final Four. But now there is a bit of pressure to them because they've already shown that they're capable of doing it. And that team is all returned from last season. They've dealt with injuries all year long. But I think with everybody getting better and they're getting healthier, I think UCLA, they could be on the path to make it back, to make another deeper in this tournament. But stay tuned to see how far I think they really go. Next, we have Texas and Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech, you can say, is the hottest team heading into this tournament. And it didn't start off well for Virginia Tech. They struggled. They started off ACC play, I believe it was 2-7. And then they rallied back, won the ACC tournament, and found their way into the dance. And Texas, they have always struggled. In fact, Texas is notorious for being a first-round exit. And I think they'll be a first-round exit again. I think Virginia Tech pulls off the upset. I think Virginia Tech, I think they keep up that win streak. And I think they keep going here. Purdue and Yale. Purdue, they are another team that can be notorious for going out in the first round. They've gone out in the first round a couple times pretty recently. But if this was Colgate instead of Yale as the 14, I would pick the upset. But I just think that Purdue, I think they will do just enough to beat Yale. Murray State and San Francisco. And Murray State, they're another team that is really hot coming into this tournament, winning 20 straight games, which is the second most in a row in college basketball, only behind South Dakota State with 21. And I think Murray State, I think they beat San Francisco. I think they're going to handle them with ease because many think that San Francisco didn't deserve to be in this tournament, that they don't deserve to be in it. Some maybe think they should be in the first four. But I have Murray State moving on. Kentucky and St. Peter's. I have Kentucky. I don't see an upset taking place in that game. I think Coach Calipari is going to have his team ready. Moving on to the South region now. Arizona and the winner between Wright State and Bryant in the play-in game. And I think that Bryant, I think they got the short end of the stick here. I felt like Bryant, they played like at least a 14 seed in their conference tournament. And the fact that they're a 16 seed, I feel like that does them a little injustice. But I think either way, Arizona gets the win. Seton Hall and TCU. And this is another one of those 8-9 matchups. It's a crapshoot. And I feel like this game is going to come down to the wire, but I'm going to go with the team that I feel like has been peaking more in this late portion of the year, and that is TCU. And now the 5-12, Houston and UAB. Houston just coming off of a Final Four run just last season, and then they ran into Baylor, who dominated everybody that they played in the tournament last year. Against UAB. Now, Houston's defense, I'd say, is the most complete defense out of any team in this tournament. However, UAB, being one of the top scoring offenses in the entire country, I feel like this is going to be potentially an upset. Some may pick it, some may not. But I have UAB pulling off the upset against Houston. I know that UAB's lack of size is, in all likelihood, going to be a huge disadvantage at some match down the line. But despite Houston being experienced, despite them coming off a Final Four run just this past season, you just got to remember that Rutgers had Houston on the ropes last year in the second round. So it's quite possible that Houston, they could have been a second round exit. Plus, I think this UAB team is really underrated. I think that some people might have UAB at least in the round of 32. Some may have them in the Sweet 16. But I have UAB at least winning this game. Illinois and Chattanooga. Chattanooga made the tournament in a thrilling overtime win against Furman in their conference tournament championship. And they take on Illinois. Illinois from the Big Ten, the stacked conference in college basketball. But Illinois, they were one of the favorites to win last year, to win the entire thing, to cut down the nets, but they got upset by Loyola Chicago in the second round. But I think Illinois, they make it past Chattanooga here. I just think Kofi Cockburn, with his size and athleticism, I think he's going to lead Illinois past Chattanooga. Colorado State and Michigan in the 6 and 11. And this is going to be the game that I believe tips things off on Thursday. And I was not sure who to pick in this one, because I'm 50-50 on this one. Colorado State, they may be a slow-paced team compared to the majority of teams in this tournament, but Mountain West teams can make work for everything. And Michigan, a team that many felt like didn't deserve to be in the spot that they're in, at least right here as an 11 seed, instead of playing in the first four. But this kind of reminds me of Syracuse from a few years ago, when a lot of us thought that Syracuse didn't necessarily deserve to be in the tournament, and then they made a deep run. Well, I think that happens to Michigan as well. I think Michigan gets past Colorado State here. Tennessee and Longwood. Longwood is in their first NCAA tournament in program history. While Tennessee, they won the SEC tournament. And I'm going to go with Tennessee. Although if Longwood pull off the upset, wouldn't be shocked, because Longwood, they're also coming to this tournament hot after a slow start to the year. They really started to change gears, and they have not looked back since. Ohio State and Loyola Chicago. Ohio State is looking to bounce back after being a contender to reach the Final Four last year, but ended up losing to Oral Roberts in the first round. And the Ramblers are once again back in the big dance. And whenever the Ramblers in the tournament, they tend to win a couple games. So I have them upsetting Ohio State in round one. I think this is going to be a pretty popular upset. Villanova and Delaware. I have Villanova winning this one. I just think Villanova's experience is going to be a huge advantage down the line. The Midwest region now, Kansas versus the winner of Texas Southern and Texas A&M Corpus Christi. And I think Kansas beats either of these teams. So I'm picking the Jayhawks. San Diego State and Creighton. And all 4 8 and 9s. Crapshoots every single time. Now, can Creighton knock down their 3-pointers? Can Creighton play the way they did against Providence in the semifinal in the Big East tournament? Creighton, I feel like, has a Sweet 16 ceiling to them. But this is going to be a low-scoring game, I think, because Creighton did struggle against Villanova in the Big East tournament final. While San Diego State, another Mountain West team, it's going to make you earn everything. But more often than not, whenever Creighton is in the tournament, they always win at least one game. But I don't think it happens here. I think San Diego State, I think in a low-scoring game, San Diego State wins. But I will say this, watch out for Creighton next year, though. Because they're a pretty young team, and they're going to get better with more experience. Iowa and Richmond, the Big Ten champions versus the Atlantic 10 champions. And Richmond, they got this tournament by upsetting Davidson in the Atlantic 10 championship. While Iowa's peaking at the right time. They won the Big Ten tournament. And I'm going to go with Iowa to pull out the win against Richmond. I just like what I've seen out of Iowa in the last week or so. Providence and South Dakota State. Now, South Dakota State over Providence feels like a popular upset. South Dakota State is the best three-point shooting team in college basketball. They're second in scoring offense, only behind Gonzaga. While Providence, it looked like they were going to have a magical season about a month ago when they made it all the way into the top 10 in the rankings. But getting blown out by Creighton, I think a lot of people are trying to pump the brakes on Providence. And I am too. But if Providence was taking on Chattanooga or if they were taking on Akron, I'd take Providence. But South Dakota State, I feel like they're the strongest 13 seed in this tournament out of the four of them. So I'm picking South Dakota State to move on to face off against Iowa in the round of 32. LSU and Iowa State. Now, LSU, they are a young team that is inexperienced. And the last thing you want when you have a young and inexperienced team heading into the tournament, you don't want distractions. And what is the distraction? Head coach Will Wade fired this past weekend over the allegations and the investigations that are taking place. And Iowa State, they have what it takes to make a pretty deep run in this tournament. So I'm going to go with the Cyclones here to pull off the upset against LSU. Now we got the 3-14, Wisconsin and Colgate. And Colgate, in the last couple tournaments that they've been in, they gave their first round opponent a run for their money. They held on pretty well against Tennessee a couple years ago, and last year they held their own against Arkansas, but that game got away from the very end. And Colgate, they shoot the three-pointer really well. Well, Wisconsin, they play disciplined basketball. I will say this, if there is a 14-3 upset that takes place in the first round this year, I think it's quite possible it's going to be this one. This, I think, will be the 14-3 that happens if it happens. But I'm going to pick Wisconsin. And I think many people, I feel like they let the last two games Wisconsin has played. I think they're holding that against them a little bit. I mean, I get that the Big Ten tends to be all hype once the tournament begins. But I just feel like at least one of the Big Ten teams has to make the Elite Eight. And I feel like it could be the Wisconsin or Iowa that does that, even though Iowa has yet to make the Sweet 16. They haven't made the Sweet 16 in a very long time. but we'll see what happens later on in my bracket. USC and Miami, and I think the size is going to be a huge advantage for USC, especially on the boards. They got one of the tallest teams, if not the tallest team in the country, USC over Miami. Auburn and Jacksonville State. And I will say this before I make my pick here. I don't care what the rules are. Jacksonville State does not belong in this tournament. This should be Bellarmine in the tournament. And I get that Jacksonville State is getting a lot of praise right now about how they're not a normal 15 seed. Even though I don't know what a normal 15 seed would be, because we've seen 15 seeds beat 2 seeds quite often. In fact, we just saw one beat a 2 seed last year in Oral Roberts. And they shoot the three-pointer really well. Very disciplined team. And I think Auburn does win this one. However, I will not be surprised if Jacksonville State keeps it close because, as I mentioned earlier, we sometimes see teams that we feel like don't deserve to be in the tournament, and they go on a tear and just prove us wrong. I don't think I'm going to see that out of Jacksonville State. I don't think we're going to see that out of Jacksonville State, but I would not be surprised. So that wraps up the round of 64. On to the round of 32. Gonzaga and Memphis. This could be a tough game for Gonzaga. Memphis, I think they are a team that I think they can grind it up from start to finish. If they're in it. Because when you're facing off against a 1 seed, no matter what seed you are yourself, whether you're a 16 or a 9, an 8, a 5, or whatever, when you're against a 1 seed and one of, if not the favorite to win the entire tournament, all you got to do is just hang in there. If you hang in there, you're going to be in their heads. And if Memphis is within maybe 5 with about 6 minutes left, they got a shot. But I think Gonzaga pulls away, and I think Gonzaga gets into the Sweet 16. UConn and Arkansas, and I'm going to pick the Razorbacks to win this one, setting up a matchup with Gonzaga in the Sweet 16, which I have seen many people say that Arkansas could be the toughest matchup for Gonzaga before the Final Four. The winner of the playing game between Rutgers and Notre Dame and Texas Tech, and I'm going to go with Texas Tech in this matchup, as I think Texas Tech advances to the Sweet 16. Michigan State and Duke, one last showdown between Tom Izzo and Coach K. You got 2 blue bloods in college basketball going at it. And I think Duke, they move on to the Sweet 16, and Coach K coaches for one more game. To the East region now, Baylor and North Carolina. If you look at recent history in the tournament, the defending champion is always out by the end of the first weekend. And I'm not sure how many years in a row that's happened, but I think the streak continues. I think North Carolina upsets Baylor. As I said earlier, I just think this North Carolina team is peaking at the right time. And Baylor has been dealing with injuries all season long. So I think North Carolina advances to the Sweet 16. The winner of the playing game between Wyoming and Indiana and UCLA. You could technically say Indiana versus UCLA. And I am going to pick UCLA to win that matchup. But again, it could be St. Mary's that I put in there, depending on how the first 4 game plays out between Wyoming and Indiana. Virginia Tech and Purdue. And I think Virginia Tech, I think they're going to keep on going. I think Virginia Tech gets to the Sweet 16. Murray State and Kentucky. Murray State is not going to be a pushover for Kentucky, but I do think Kentucky is going to win. I just think that Murray State's going to get a reality check at some point in this tournament. I think it's going to be right here against Kentucky. Moving on to the South region, Arizona and TCU. Now, Arizona is dealing with a big injury right now in point guard Kerr Creason, as he suffered an ankle injury in the Pac-12 tournament against Stanford. but it's optimistic that he's going to be able to play in the first weekend of the tournament. I don't really want to jinx Arizona here, but I think they can go without him in the first round game between the either Wright State or Bryant. But I don't know necessarily if they can I don't know how much further they can advance without him. So I feel like there's going to be a point where they're going to need him. Although they did well in the rest of the Pac-12 tournament without him, they're going to need him eventually. Do I think it's going to be against TCU? I don't necessarily think so. I think Arizona, I feel like with their consistency all year long, I think Arizona is at the very least a Sweet 16 team. UAB and Illinois. And I think UAB does it again. I think they upset Illinois and advance to the Sweet 16. Michigan and Tennessee. And I am going to pick another upset here. I think Michigan makes the Sweet 16 because sometimes when I say teams shouldn't be in, they go further than what I predict them to. So I'll go with Michigan to make the Sweet 16. Loyola Chicago and Villanova. I think that Villanova beats Loyola Chicago. However, it's not going to be an easy out because Loyola Chicago, great defensive team, a team that's going to make you play all 40 minutes. But I do have Villanova winning at the very end. Midwest region now, Kansas and San Diego State. I would not be shocked if San Diego State beat Kansas because Kansas, they've been a second-round exit for quite some time now in this tournament. And they've been second-round exits pretty frequently, but I don't think this time. I think Kansas makes the Sweet 16. Iowa and South Dakota State. Now, what a matchup this would be. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game if this is the matchup that we get. And it's probably going to come down to who can hit their threes. If South Dakota State is making their three-pointers, it's going to be a long game for Iowa. And Iowa has not made the Sweet 16 under current head coach Fran McCaffrey. But I think that this is the year that Iowa finally makes the Sweet 16. I have Iowa advancing for South Dakota State, but I would not be surprised if South Dakota State made the Sweet 16. As South Dakota State, in my mind, they do have Sweet 16 upside, but I am picking Iowa for that. Iowa State and Wisconsin, and I'm going to go with the Badgers to move on to the Sweet 16. USC and Auburn. Now, this, I think, is going to be a very tough game for Auburn, especially if USC is dominating along the boards. But I think Auburn wins, move on to the Sweet 16. But I think USC is going to be a very tough matchup for Auburn, but I think they'll get it done. Sweet 16 now, Gonzaga and Arkansas. Arkansas, I think, will be able to challenge Gonzaga, but I think Gonzaga pulls it off and advances to the Elite Eight. Texas Tech and Duke. Texas Tech, always a deep threat to make a deep run in the tournament. And I do think, however, the road for the Raiders, the Red Raiders, ends here. I think Duke advances to the Elite Eight, setting up an Elite Eight showdown with Gonzaga. North Carolina and UCLA. And I am going to actually go with the Bruins here to advance the Elite Eight. Virginia Tech and Kentucky. I think the road for Virginia Tech ends here. I think Kentucky cools off Virginia Tech's hot streak, advances to the Elite Eight. Arizona and UAB. I think the Cinderella story for UAB ends here. I think Arizona advances to the Elite Eight. Michigan and Villanova. I think Villanova advances over Michigan to go to the Elite Eight. Kansas and Iowa, I am going to go with the Jayhawks. Wisconsin and Auburn, I think this is the furthest that I feel like most people would put Wisconsin. If you're seeing my bracket video after you've seen a lot of other people's, I feel like there's not going to be many that put Wisconsin in the Sweet 16, but I have Wisconsin advancing to the Elite Eight. And I feel like I'm the only one that people have probably seen so far do that. But I just like Wisconsin's discipline, the fact they don't turn the ball over that much, the fact they play clean basketball. Now we're at the Elite Eight, Gonzaga and Duke, and what a showdown that we are going to have if this is the matchup that we get. Now, I thought that it was a possibility that we could have seen this matchup in the championship game. And we saw this matchup earlier in the year, and Duke won 84-81. But I think Gonzaga wins this matchup this time because Duke right now, I feel like I just feel like things are discombobulating for Duke. Despite it looking like Duke makes a run here to the Elite Eight, I just feel like there's going to be some point in this tournament where Duke just collapses. I think it's here against Gonzaga because Gonzaga actually played Duke really close the first time they played each other. And I think Gonzaga avenges one of their 3 losses from the regular season and advances to the Final Four. UCLA and Kentucky. I have Kentucky advancing to the Final Four. I feel like Kentucky is one of the more complete teams in this tournament. You could also say UCLA is a complete team based off their experiences from last year. But I feel like Kentucky, I feel like it's their year to finally get back to the Final Four. Because I think they got the talent to do it, the talent and athleticism. Arizona and Villanova. And I do realize that I am getting risky here by picking Arizona to go to the Final Four, but Arizona has come close to making the Final Four quite a bit of times in recent years. And I think this is the year they finally get back to the Final Four. I have Arizona moving on. Kansas and Wisconsin. Now, believe it or not, I had a hard time picking this one. But I am going to go with the Jayhawks to make to the Final Four. And believe it or not, I actually had Wisconsin when I was looking at it for the first time. But I have Kansas going to the Final Four. So my Final Four, I have Gonzaga, Kentucky, Arizona, and Kansas. So 3 1s and a 2. Now, it may feel like chalk, but I don't think so. I don't think it's necessarily a chalk. I was close to having Wisconsin in my Final Four. So I'm hoping that Wisconsin doesn't make the Final Four because I don't want to have regret. But Gonzaga and Kentucky. And moving on to the championship game on Monday, April the 4th, between Gonzaga and Kentucky, I have Gonzaga. And moving on to championship night between Arizona and Kansas, I have Arizona. So that sets up the championship game between Gonzaga and Arizona, a West Coast showdown for the national championship. And winning the 2022 NCAA Tournament, I have, drum roll, Arizona. I have Arizona winning because I feel like when you look at Arizona, Gonzaga, I feel like those have been 2 of the most consistent teams all season long. And we saw the tournament last year end with the most 2 consistent teams in the championship. And I think we're going to see that again, as they may not be the 2 most consistent teams, but they're probably 2 of the most 4 to 5 consistent teams in the tournament. So that is my 2022 March Madness bracket. at least the bracket for my tournament challenge. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, have a good day.